Hey there, I'm glad you're back. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do subscribe. This story is about the cursed werewolf Drako Silversmouth. The previous 2 parts shall be linked below in the description. If you like werewolf stories, you're in the right place. We are diving deep into their territory. Please be comfortable. Here I begin. Place: London 1680. Times when humanity meant nothing, and beasts roamed free among men, or was there any difference between the 2 species? This is my story. I am Drako Silversmouth, a cursed werewolf, and tonight may very well be the night I rot beneath the twisted limbs of Epping Forest. My blood seeped so deep into the earth that even the worms would turn away in revulsion. The wound in my chest is not just open, it yawns. Flesh split wide, ribs jagged and poking out like splintered white tusks, each rise of breath a shriek of agony that trembles in the marrow of my bones. My lungs hiss with every pull of air, wet and raw, torn halfway from their sockets. My heart pumps slow now, sluggish, thick with a blood so dark it looks more like tar, sticky and clotted, trailing in pulpy strands down my sides, pooling in the black altar stones of the Black Ditch ruins. It doesn't heal. Not like it used to. The hole where Volgar's claws raked me open refuses to close. The beast in me, hungry, sacred, eternal, cowers beneath the weight of starvation. I tried to save them, the hunters. The irony isn't lost on me. I who have torn men in two, who has bathed in the screams of prey, and my father. Richard Drake, he'll never know that the beast who took the blow meant for him is the same plague-rotted child who was left to die in the trenches. I died then, in the dirt and pestilence, throat bloated with bile, skin turned black from fever. But death only made me the beast I am today. And I should have fed. I haven't tasted human blood in too long, haven't sunk my teeth into the ripe, twitching muscle of a live body in weeks. The forest has starved me, and now it watches me die. The full moon glares down like a voyeur, bloated and obscene, its light sharp and mocking. My ribs are knives in my own body. I can't feel my legs. The pain is like fire buried beneath my skin, chewing from the inside out. I should have let them die. My ankle's a mess of pulp and splinters. Volgar's stomp reduced the bone to gravel. I try to rise, clawing at slick stone, limbs spasming in fury. My back arches with effort. My claws scrape against lichen-slick roots, slipping, catching, ripping bark as I heave my ruined frame upright. My body is shifting without guidance now, caught in the throes of partial transformation, fur shedding in wet clumps, muscle twisting in knots, bones stretching and snapping as they remember the man beneath the wolf, and the beast beneath the man. I howl. It isn't noble. It isn't proud. It's a broken, tremulous groan torn from a chest held together by stubborn hatred alone. Volgar, Gorum, Thatch, Bracca, Mord, Vila, Scarn. 7. The cursed pack, fang traders. They didn't kill me. They stripped me of what I was. Left me as carrion for the maggots and the crows. But in the world of werewolves, you either follow or you conquer. I will do neither. I will rip the crown from Volgar's skull with my bare jaws and choke on his blood if it means I die on my own terms. The forest does not aid me. It watches, silent. Its trees bend like gnarled fingers over the hollow paths, roots rising to trip me, thorn bushes whispering curses in the wind. Hangman's Lane yawns to the west, and I drag myself through it, my blood leaving a trail the color of nightfall. I pass the rotting skeletons of old gallows where crows still perch and peck at eye sockets long emptied. I do not count the hours. The moon shifts in the sky, a slow witness to my misery. My legs tremble. I vomit blood again. I catch a whiff of my own death in the air. And then ahead, flickers of light. Lanterns, horse-drawn carts clattering down the road from Thaden Bois. Nobles, traders, the ignorant and unworthy. But there, in the ditch beside the road, abandoned and decaying litter. Old rags, soggy bread, the cast-offs of humans. I collapse. The ground is cold, damp, and stinks of piss and decay. It welcomes me like a grave. But the hunger won't let me sleep. They come dozens, fat and fearless, drawn by the blood. One scurries across my mangled thigh. I wait, then snap. My jaws close around its spine with a crunch that sends shivers through my gums. Its skull bursts in my mouth. I chew it slowly, savoring the warm pop of eyeballs, the grind of bone, the burst of organ slurry across my tongue. Another climbs my ribs. I snatch it mid-step, tear it in half, let the entrails slide down my throat. Its blood is weak, but it is blood, and that is enough. I eat until my muzzle is slick with rat brains and the dirt is smeared in gore. I drink from the muddy puddles. Taste rot and old urine. My tongue burns. I retch, then drink again. Then it begins, the change. My eyes snap wide, pupils stretching, then pulsing. Then my chest convulses. And I can feel my fingers, clawed and caked in filth, curl into fists. Then like the sound of a distant church bell, it irritates again, the strength of 10 in a beast. The wound in my chest clenches, closing like a puckered mouth. Muscle stitches together in painful surges, bone grinding, reshaping, healing with each fresh gulp of vermin blood. My spine straightens. My ribcage bulges and repairs. My scream is not that of man or beast, it is something beyond. A sound that tears through the fog like lightning through bark. I am not dying easy, I crawl from the filth and claim what is mine. The 7, my nemesis. You know, in the world of werewolves, the hierarchy has to be earned by blood, and I shall either live or die trying to be the alpha. Earned some notorious reputation over the plague years, but that is not enough. Rain slicked the crumbling skin of the forest like blood on old wounds. Epping held its breath. The full moon had vanished now, swallowed by swollen clouds, but its damage was already etched into the soil and bone. It's the full moon that makes the bones and the muscles stretch beyond pain, rage and constant hunger. I cannot control this transformation as of yet, like the first maw or the alpha werewolf Volgar. I moved slowly, naked, skin streaked with mud and rodent blood, every muscle trembling from the shift. My eyes, sharp and sunken, scanned the gloom for warmth, for light. That was when I saw a hut, crooked roof. Yellow flicker inside. My ribs burned as I limped closer. My chest still felt torn from Volgar's strike. Bones cracked with each step, unhealed. The hut leaned like a drunk on a slanted grave, siding eaten away by damp rot. One shutter swung in the wind, the other bolted shut with rust-bitten nails. Light flickered from within. A candle, maybe more. Smoke curled like a thread of doubt from the crooked chimney. I pressed my filthy hands against the swollen wood of the door and shoved. It creaked open on reluctant hinges. And there she was. The woman from Wellesby Hollow. The one who moved like smoke, the one whose voice offered beer but whose eyes offered none of the usual questions. She turned, slow and precise, and regarded me with a gaze neither frightened nor warm. Her dress clung damply to her frame, sleeves rolled past her elbows, hands stained red from water or work. "Are you lost, mister?" she asked. "I believe I saw you back in Wellesby Hollow. You were standing at the bar." I said nothing. She looked me over, not with shame or disgust, but with a sort of practiced curiosity. Her eyes lingered on the thick hair still clinging to my chest and arms, too dense for any man to wear. "You're naked," she said. Not surprised. Just observant. I was pretty sure she would observe the more than normal hairs of my body. I don't know whether she found it scary or attractive, but I let the thought pass. After all, I was shivering. Rain took the rest. I muttered, voice scraping from a throat half ruined by howling. She didn't recoil. She stepped to the side, gesturing to a rough bench by the hearth. She grabbed a bundle, some blankets and linen strips stitched from old garments, and tossed them toward me. Not much, but warmer than skin. I took them, dressed slow. My fingers were stiff, my nerves still raw. Every thread dragged over wounds, but the pain was a reminder that I was not dead. "Marla," she said after a moment, "that's my name and yours?" My mouth moved, shaping the name of a boy who died in a plague trench years ago. I buried it. "Drako," I answered. She poured hot water into a chipped mug, set it down on the table beside me. "You look like something death bit and spat back out." I didn't respond. The rain picked up outside, drumming against the thatch. A thin trickle leaked through, tapping into a metal bowl on the floor. "You're not local," she said. "Was long ago." She gave a nod, almost to herself. Maybe she recognized that tone. Maybe she'd heard it from other broken things. Minutes passed. She said nothing more. Neither did I. The warmth began to return to my limbs. The beast quieted, slightly. I stood, but the warmth and care of a woman, especially in moments like this, will even calm the wildest beast. "There's a go down," I said. Marla frowned. "You won't find kindness there. Only men who measure worth in pain." I moved to the door. She grabbed a cloak from a peg and tossed it to me. Worn threadbare, but it did the job. "Don't die out there," she said, voice nearly lost under the wind. I didn't answer. I slipped into the rain. The go-down loomed like a carcass at the roadside. Its beams sagged. Its windows were dark or boarded. I crept through the alley behind crates and old tarps. I moved with silence wrapped around me, melted into shadow. Voices echoed through the downpour. A man loud, cruel, fat from power and wine, dressed in a fur coat stained at the edges. He towered over two servants on their knees in the slush. "Half the profit. Fucking half. What do you think this is? A damn charity?" "We swear, sir, we brought it all." Crack, the whip carved into flesh. The servant didn't scream much, folding into himself. I was pretty sure he got used to the insult and the beating. Humans are petty creatures thinking they run the world with morale. Stupid as they could be. "You thieving piss rats think I'm blind? You'll bleed for this." Another strike. I stepped out of the shadows. The trader turned, startled. "What the hell? Who are you crawling out here like a wet dog?" His eyes scanned my ragged form, my bare feet sunk in mud, cloak dripping. "You got a death wish, beggar?" I stared. "Well? Speak, mongrel." "Not for you," I growled. A part of me desired to sever his head off his fragile spine and drink off the blood like a trophy, but I let it go. I was too tired. I don't know what exactly I was looking for, but I found some pleasure in wandering around, found a new life after all. A new renewed purpose, as you know. I turned and walked. My legs ached. My hands twitched with hunger. The smell of his blood was thick in the air. But not tonight. He was not the one I had returned for. "Go on then," the trader sneered. "Back to your ditch." I said nothing. The rain swallowed his laughter. My feet carried me to the familiar path. Old stones, gnarled trees. Roots that curled like fingers clutching secrets. The entrance appeared, dark, jagged, buried beneath brush and bramble. My cave, round walls of granite that was home. The place I returned to when the world offered nothing else. The place where the remnants of my hunger slept. I knew Volgar and the pack has territory over most of these forests, and I remember the work that I had to do to conquer it all. I stepped inside. The stench of old death rose to greet me. Bones littered the corners, gnawed, cracked, sucked dry. Shreds of clothing, some still bearing initials embroidered in better times, clung to rocks. There was a pile of skulls in one corner, some bleached white by moonlight that leaked in through a crack in the stone. I shed the cloak, laid it flat. I stared into the dark, where my crimes sat like ghosts. And I waited. Outside, the rain carved deeper into the land. The moon remained hidden. The forest, like me, endured in shadow. And somewhere beyond that dark, the seven still walked. Volgar, Gorum, Thatch, Bracca, Mord, Vila, Skarn. They thought me dead, forgotten. And it won't be long when one of them comes up crawling up to the cave to claim my death. As I closed my eyes, I fell asleep fast enough, cannot understand what exactly it was, feeling of sleepiness or temporary state of death. I don't know how much time has passed. Days, maybe a week. Dreams come in red and black flashes, the vision of a predator etched into blood-stained memories. The barmaid from Welsby Hollow, my father's weary eyes, the ash-choked streets of plague-ridden London, and the first maw that split my flesh and gave me this cursed life, all of them came and went like stabs of lightning behind closed eyes. Then came the sound of boots. A distant crunch, faint but heavy. 100 yards, maybe a little less. Not woodland travelers, not scavengers. No, this was something else entirely. The scent followed like a lash across my tongue, silver and blood, slick and acrid, alive and hating. Hunters again. The last of the rain had died, leaving the forest slick and gleaming. And with the clouds broken, the moon returned in all her silver wrath. My skin prickled as the first light brushed it. The shift this time was not gentle. My back arched with a violent snap as vertebrae realigned. Muscle tore and knotted itself anew. My jaw stretched with a wet crunch, teeth pushing out like bone blades. Claws split from fingertips. My ribs creaked outward, my skin tearing to make way for fur and sinew. A scream died in my throat, strangled by the rising growl of the beast. I dropped to all fours, snarling half-man, half-wolf, and entirely rage. Then I smelled them fully. Ox, a tower of flesh, thick and slow-looking, but never slow. He adjusted his silver-stitched gloves with the elegance of a beast. His wolfsbane satchel reeked of oil and menace. He was speaking, voice gruff and too loud. And Lormer, blind but not blind. His eyes had been taken by fire long ago, bandages now crusted with weeks-old blood. But his other senses, gods, his other senses could shame a hawk. He stood like a statue, head tilted slightly as if the wind itself were whispering my name into his ear. They crawled through the muck, mud caking their boots and knees, slowly circling to the rear of the cave mouth. They were laying traps, tripwires lined with silver threads, crude explosives, and enough dynamite to collapse the mountainside if they felt lucky. I crouched deeper into the cave shadows, watching them like a predator. They didn't know I was this close. I still say we should have brought the others, Ox muttered, checking the flintlock barrel of his rifle. This bastard took down half of Volgar's pack on his own. That ain't natural. Which is why the bounty is this fat, Lorimer answered, voice dry as parchment. You want to split it 5 ways? I don't. Hell, if we pull this off, Ox chuckled, licking his cracked lips. Forget the rat dens in town. I'll buy a mansion. Big stone walls. Ladies of noble blood, not alley rats. Maybe even get myself knighted. Lorimer sniffed the air. You'd end up the same, drunk and broke in a week. They laughed, but there was fear underneath it, as ripe as the blood behind Lorimer's bandages. They were scared. I could smell it, taste it even. Like metal and sweat. They remembered the way I stood between Volgar's snapping jaws and my father's broken body. They remembered how I carved through those beasts without hesitation. And they knew, if I'd turned on them then, they'd have been corpses in the snow. But tonight, They had convinced themselves I was weaker. Wounded, hiding, hungry. They were right. But that didn't make me less dangerous. The silver lace traps clinked into place. The dynamite stacks were set like teeth in the ground. Ox glanced around and raised his rifle toward the shadows. "Come out, Silversmouth," he hissed. "Come get your grave." I did. The shadows exploded with my movement. One heartbeat I was crouched inside. The next I was upon them, crashing through the rain-wet brush like a landslide of muscle and fury. My claws caught Ox's shoulder, tearing flesh and mail like wet paper. He screamed, a sound cut short as I slammed him into the mud. Lorimer spun, sword drawn. I saw the glint of silver just as it nicked my flank. Fire tore through my side. The scent of my own burning blood sent me into deeper madness. I lunged to the side. Lorimer dodged. I didn't know a blind man could be this agile. But I knew his rhythm now. I feinted, dropped low, then sprang upward, jaws open wide. I caught his arm, felt the snap of bone and the rush of hot blood fill my mouth. He shrieked, swinging blindly with his other hand, striking me with the hilt. Pain sang up my snout, but I didn't let go. I bit down. The arm came loose with a sickening rip. Ox was back on his feet now, reloading. The flintlock barked once. Fire burst against my shoulder. The shot didn't pierce deep, but the silver burned. I roared, louder than I ever had, the cry shaking leaves from trees and echoing into the mountains. And then I charged. I barreled into Ox like a cannonball. His bones cracked beneath me. I grabbed his face with both claws and slammed it into the mud again and again until there was no face left, just pulp. Breathing heavily, I turned. Lorimer had crawled back toward the dynamite stash, blood trailing behind him like a red ribbon. He fumbled for the torch he had dropped earlier, desperation dripping from every motion. I reached him before he could strike flint. He turned to me, blood in his teeth, silver sword shaking in one hand. "Damn you," he rasped. I gritted my teeth hard, so damn hard that I could feel the blood of my wolf tongue. I lunged, jaws wide. He screamed once, then not again. His blood filled my mouth. But beneath it, there was power. His heart still beat when I tore into it. Ox's muscles twitched when I devoured them. And as I fed, I changed. I churned even the last bits of intestine and the meat and the heart and the liver. I chewed till there was only the skull left with chunks of skin. I had my full. Human meat fed me like nothing else. I could feel it. My wounds closing, my bones growing denser, my limbs thickening with power. My mind slipped deeper into the animal, but also higher into something else. Something beyond even the pack. War was coming to me and I needed the strength to face my own kind. There was no room for human feelings anymore. Reincarnation, gauche, I felt the burning power inside me. My eyes burned gold. My claws lengthened. My breath fogged the air like smoke from a furnace. I feel bigger now, much bigger. I stood on 2 legs, then 4, then 2 again, form flickering like flame between beast and man. Not in pain now. This was not madness. This was clarity. They came for the bounty. They came with dreams of fame, of noble wives and eastern palaces. They died in the dirt, and I feasted on them like gods once fed on sacrifice. Deep within the heart of Epping Forest, the howls of the pack pierced through the night like a jagged blade, tearing apart the silence that had gripped the woods. The sound was unmistakable, familiar and full of primal rage. It was the pack of 7, led by Volgar, and they had sensed my return. The shift had been subtle but irreversible, and now they were hunting me once more, aware that I had been reincarnated, that I was not the same creature that once roamed these woods. I knew the pack too well to act rashly. They would be hunting for a fight, eager to test their strength against mine, but I had learned the value of patience in this cursed existence. I climbed up a towering wych elm, its gnarled branches twisting like skeletal fingers toward the heavens. The rough bark scraped against my skin as I ascended, but I didn't mind. It was nothing compared to the pain I had endured in my past life. From my perch, high above the forest floor, I could see Volgar and the rest of his pack moving below. Their forms were little more than shadows at first, flickers in the night as they prowled, scanning the treeline with a savage intensity. They were looking for me, their senses attuned to every shift in the air. I remained still, blending into the dark canopy, knowing that even a slight movement could betray my position. The hours dragged on, but I did not move. Volgar's pack was methodical. They were used to hunting like wolves, a unified force that would not give up their pursuit easily. I could see their silhouettes flicking back and forth between the trees, occasionally pausing to sniff the air. Every now and then, one of them would let out a low, guttural howl, a signal to the others that they were closing in, but it was never directed at me. They were only testing, searching for any trace of the creature that had once ruled these woods. As I waited, I could feel the tension building in the air. The forest had gone eerily silent, save for the occasional rustling of the leaves as a breeze picked up. Then, just when I thought I could not bear the weight any longer, Volgar moved forward. He was massive, his form barely visible in the moonlight, but his presence was undeniable. I could feel his nostrils flaring, his senses searching the air like a bloodhound on a trail. He was close now. I held my breath, feeling the familiar, sharp sting of anticipation crawl up my spine. Volgar paused, sniffing the air, his eyes scanning the darkness. He was close enough now that I could hear the faintest sounds of his breathing, labored and heavy. He was searching for me, and the scent of my blood must have been strong in the air. I could feel his gaze sweeping across the trees, but still he could not find me. For a long moment he remained still, his head tilting slightly to one side, as though he were considering something. Then, without warning, he dropped onto all fours, his large body crashing through the underbrush. His pack followed suit, fanning out in a coordinated formation. They were like a well-oiled machine, moving as one, scanning the ground for any sign of where I had gone. I knew what they were looking for: blood. Volgar reached the two bodies that I had left behind earlier, their broken forms strewn carelessly across the forest floor. He sniffed them, his nostrils flaring as he tried to determine what had happened. The scent of death hung thick in the air, mingling with the earth and wet foliage. Volgar's expression twisted in disgust as he pawed at one of the bodies, shoving it aside with a snarl. The rage in his growl was palpable. It wasn't the usual rage of hunger, but of something deeper, more personal. He had expected to feast on these bodies, to satisfy the primal urge to hunt and kill, but instead, it was me he had been hunting. He knew this now. He knew I was no longer just a beast. I was something else entirely. With a guttural roar, Volgar turned and motioned to his pack. The others responded instantly, their movements swift and fluid as they retreated into the shadows of the forest. Their sickening howls echoed through the night, a final cry of frustration and rage before they disappeared into the darkness. I remained in the tree, unmoving, until the last of the howls had faded into the distance. Only then did I allow myself to drop silently from the branches, my feet landing with a soft thud on the damp earth below. I was cautious now, every step measured. The pack had left, but I knew they would be back. They always came back. I had business to attend to. The hunters, those who had come for me before, were still out there. I could feel their presence like a cold shadow hanging over the forest. I had to finish the business. I moved swiftly through the underbrush, my body blending into the darkness like a predator stalking its prey. My senses were heightened, sharp as a blade. I knew where I was going without thinking, toward Wellsby Hollow, the bar that had become a haven for hunters, criminals, and other unsavory sorts. It was a place where deals were made in hushed whispers, and where blood was spilled just as easily as ale was poured. Welsby Hollow was not far. I could smell the stench of the town long before I reached it: sawdust, wet timber, and something far worse that lingered in the air like a rancid perfume. As I approached, the low murmur of voices reached my ears, a cacophony of drunken chatter and the clinking of tankards. The smell of cooked meat mixed with the sour stench of sweat and smoke. The Lamb's Respite, the bar that had earned its reputation as a haven for those who thrived on violence. The door was cracked open, spilling light and noise into the alleyway. I stepped closer, moving with slow, deliberate steps, my feet making no sound against the cobbled street. Inside, I knew the scene was as chaotic as I had imagined. Mingling scents of cheap wine, stale beer, and the faint hint of blood. The room was packed with people: farmers, soldiers, merchants, and the occasional hooker, all of them stumbling through their lives like insects caught in a web. The floor was slick with spilled drink, and the tables were crowded with rowdy men laughing and shouting over dice games. The bar itself was a grimy affair: dark wood, stained with years of neglect, and a row of tarnished silver mugs hanging above the counter. The barkeep, a thin man with a nervous look in his eyes, was wiping down the bar with a rag that had seen better days. His eyes flickered toward me as I entered, but he said nothing, merely nodding once before returning to his work. I waited outside in the underbrush. I scanned the room from a distance, senses on high alert, looking for the familiar faces, the hunters who had once sought me out, who had tried to take my life for sport. They were here, somewhere, but I would find them. So I waited patiently, crouched in all fours. The sudden, sharp scream split the air like a crack of thunder. "Let me go, bastard!" The voice, raw with fear, was unmistakable. It was Marla's, the woman who had once offered me beer and humanity. The sound of the struggle was too clear to ignore. A man's gruff voice murmured something in reply, but I couldn't make out the words. Then, the unmistakable sound of tearing fabric echoed through the murky atmosphere of Welsby Hollow, followed by a sickening, wet laugh. The man was not simply trying to overpower her, he was attempting to tear her soul apart, devouring her in ways far more horrifying than a beast ever could. There were no claws involved in this twisted ritual. The beast here was not flesh and bone. This was the cruelty of man, one of many predators who fed on the weak in the shadows of the world. I did not hesitate. I walked on two legs, my powerful muscles coiling as I moved with the speed of a predator born from nightmare. My senses sharpened, my vision narrowing to the source of the disturbance. The man, he was tall, with a filthy, unshaven face and greasy hair. He loomed over Marla, his hands clawing at her dress, ripping it as though he had a right to her body, to her very being. His breath was heavy with anticipation. He could smell her terror, and it fed him. In a single motion, I closed the gap between us. My hand shot out, seizing the man's arm with an iron grip, my fingers like a vice around his bones. The raw strength in my fingers tore through his skin as I sliced open his hand, blood spilling onto the ground with an audible splatter. His howl of pain was drowned by my own growl, a deep, guttural sound that emanated from the very depths of my chest. Before he could react, I sank my fangs into his neck, into the fragile, weak veins of his throat. His blood was thick, hot, and foul. It was the taste of a man who had lived without honor, whose soul had long since been devoured by darkness. He was nothing but a vessel for his own vile appetites. Marla screamed again, but this time it was not out of fear for herself. She recognized me, recognized the tattered pieces of her own dress that I had kept, still clinging to my waist. I could see the recognition in her eyes, her face frozen in a mixture of shock and confusion. She tried to scream, to warn the others, but I silenced her with a low, warning growl. It was enough to make her stumble back, her eyes wide, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The man's body convulsed under my grip, the last remnants of his life draining from him. His hands trembled, his body going limp. But I didn't release him until the last of his essence had been consumed, every last drop of his foul, soulless blood. I did not simply kill him. I devoured him, consumed the last remnants of his broken soul. There was no glory in such a death, only a twisted, unholy satisfaction that filled the emptiness within me. With a final, vicious tug, I dragged his lifeless form away from Marla, tossing him carelessly into the underbrush. He would rot here, far from where any memory of his actions could taint the earth. But as I stood over his remains, I felt something else. A presence. It was faint at first, like a whisper on the wind. Then it grew louder, closer, more distinct. A low, rumbling growl echoed from the distance, barely audible, but unmistakable. It was the sound of something primal, something that knew no mercy. I could feel the pack nearby, Volgar and his wolves. They were not far, moving with a hunger that only beasts could understand. They had finished their feast, but now they were hunting again. They were closing in on the weak, the defenseless. Screams pierced the night, a chorus of terror from miles away. The unmistakable sound of children crying out, women's desperate pleas for mercy. The pack was feasting. I knew this feeling too well. Their hunger was insatiable. They did not simply kill. They tore apart the very fabric of humanity, breaking it into pieces with every vicious swipe of their claws. And now, they were devouring the weak, the frail. The screams echoed through the hollow, rising in pitch as the pack circled its prey. The scent of blood, rich and sweet, would draw them further. They would not stop until every last soul had been consumed. I moved quickly, slipping through the shadows like a ghost, my instincts guiding me toward the source of the screams. The ground beneath my feet trembled as I ran, each stride bringing me closer to the village, the thatch huts where the weak had sought refuge. The smell of burning timber and smoke filled the air as I neared the clearing. I could hear them now, the howls of Volgar, a guttural cry that reverberated through the night. His pack was scattered across the village, tearing through the huts like animals in a frenzy. They were unstoppable. The night was alive with their madness, their bloodlust. I could smell their presence before I saw them. Volgar's scent was distinct, darker, more pungent than the others, laced with the sharp tang of iron. The stench of blood hung thick in the air as the pack tore apart the village. Screams echoed around me as women and children were dragged from their homes, their terror mingling with the howls of the wolves. The pack didn't simply kill. They made statements. I could feel my body shifting, my muscles twitching, the urge to join the hunt rising within me. But I resisted. I moved closer, crouching behind a mound of debris as I watched Volgar, his hulking form tearing through a hut with ease, his pack close behind him. They were like a blur of fur and claws, hunting as a unified force, consuming everything in their path. It wasn't just their hunger that drove them, it was the thrill of the hunt, the taste of power. The wolves were not merely creatures of instinct, they were predators who knew how to strike fear into the hearts of their prey. I knew what had to be done. My claws biting into the earth beneath me. I had waited long enough. The time had come to face Volgar, to challenge him for control of this land. I could already feel the weight of the coming battle pressing down on me. It was necessary. I had no choice. The pack would either bow before me or they would die. I rose from the shadows, my eyes fixed on Volgar. He was towering over a group of fallen villagers, his teeth bared in a cruel, satisfied grin. His pack howled in the distance, their voices a chorus of bloodlust. Volgar had long since abandoned any notion of honor. He was a monster, a creature who thrived on chaos and destruction. And I, Drako Silversmouth, was the only one who could take him down. I moved forward, my every step deliberate, my gaze never leaving his. I would not let him continue to ravage this land. I would take it from him. And when I claimed this land, I would rule it. And as I stood on all twos howling at the moon, the land went silent. It knew there was war to come. If you liked this episode, do subscribe to my channel. More interesting stories are on the way, and your support encourages me to work even harder. Thank you very much.